Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, which is usually what I said before, there are not so many differences between the Pillar 2 and the global directive and guilty. Let me say there are differences, but the point is the two different tools to face the same problem. The point is the US allow to deduct somewhere the R&D fees or R&D credit.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, Europe and the globe does not. And for my opinion, this is a mistake in Europe because we need research and development in Europe. At the present moment, we need more in Europe than in the US. And so you can understand when you face the problem with the rationality and you look at the difference and you look at the gap and you realize that the gap is not so wide, I think it could be easy to find an agreement useful for both of us. At the present moment, we are just talking about a kind of permanent safe harbor regarding company in low tax risk country, and the US is a low tax risk country. And
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. Maybe this could be the easiest solution uh, to find a kind of agreement for Pillar 2 to work, because if you are a company based on a low tax risks, you will not subject to the UTPR. But as you may understand, this is just the easiest solution that may create the place for another negotiation
Yeah.
that is needed at the moment. Because consider that also, let's say, a globe is useful, like, as I said before, globe is very useful within the EU to avoid tax arbitrage within the EU member country, because at the present moment, we don't have a kind of federal taxation. So the EU Commission cannot say this is a new tax. What the EU Commission could say is not the amount of tax to pay, but what you cannot do to avoid tax. So this is really complicated. And for the EU, global minimum tax is very useful. But I can understand that at the international level, and I'm not just talking about the US, I'm talking about the other countries, and also from the China perspective, we all talk about the US approach to Pillar 2, but at the end of the day, not even China adopt Pillar 1, of course, and mostly Pillar 2, because the industry of China are financed from the government. They receive the credit, non-refundable, because they still use tax 7, and the US does not. Maybe they does, but I mean, it depends on the company. So the point is, there are many things. Let me say to fine tune, because the situation has completely changed since the beginning of the BEPS. And it's quite natural that if the situation has changed just in 15 years, we need to fine tune the mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, with a simple mechanism and not like the mechanism of the globe. Lately, let me underline that uh, at least in Europe, company they spend a lot of money to adopt the BEPS and to adopt the globe. So also for the companies to change the tax environment, the company and businesses need tax certainty and simplification if possible. For instance, recently the Germany producer, the association of the producers said we can suspend the globe. I mean, it's not possible to suspend the globe until you change the directive within the EU Council. And it's not something that politically you can do, because you need the unanimity of the 27 country. And I think that the Council of Europe at the present moment have got to decide so many things that they don't want to go back to talk about globe.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the situation.
So it's my personal view that at some point, I suspect the United States is going to um, make changes to the GILTI and maybe the BEAT and the corporate minimum tax to bring it in line with what the OECD wants in terms of Pillar Two, and that's going to allow allow for it to be to fall under the QDMTT sort of safe harbor, I suppose. But I guess if that's the case, then do you think that's enough for countries to say, okay, well, this has been successful. Pillar one, yeah, it didn't work out, but Pillar two, the United States has accepted the Pillar two um, guidelines. You know, U.S. already now has a Pillar two tax. Is that enough for Europe to say this has all been, or the rest of the world to say this has all been a success? Or do you think they're going to say, well, but we still have all these other problems? Because when we were talking before we got onto the webinar about the rationale for why you would want something like a Pillar One tax, you had said something to the effect of, well, the point of a corporate income tax is to make sure that shareholders don't have their wealth tied up in a corporation so that they can't be taxed. And if a country like the United States isn't willing to tax those shareholders, then countries outside of the United States should be able to come in and apply the tax to rectify that situation because it's sort of like a tax equity argument that the money needs to be taxed by somebody. If the country that those people are living in won't tax it, then somebody should. Is that the view of the EU? And if so, does that mean that we need to have a BEPS 3.0? Because Pillar 2 isn't enough. We still need to have a global corporate wealth tax. We still need to have an individual global wealth tax because Europe is still pushing for global tax equity.
Uh, Let me say I agree with you. As I said before, I'm convinced, let me say, for instance, it's easier for the single country to cancel the digital service tax because they are digital, because they are national taxation, and it's quite impossible for EU to cancel the globe. And let me say from the other side, globe is really something that the EU needs. So starting from this point, let's say, I think in a logical word that some way, somehow, we will find a solution for the Pillar 2 and maybe the safe harbor for low tax risk could be the solution. I think that maybe we can find a solution. We need to find a proper solution on digital service tax, because the other point is that if it's true that the consumption of data create value, so it's quite natural that the single jurisdiction, and now I'm not talking just about the EU member country, but I think that the single jurisdiction want the fair tax of the fair amount of tax. Consider, for instance, I don't want to talk about a possibility to create a kind of new agreement within the UN, but at the present moment, within the Model Tax Convention of the United Nations, the Article 12b foresee a kind of withholding on digital service on the purchase of digital service tax. So if you adopt that convention and in a jurisdiction, if a jurisdiction adopted the UN convention and a business resident in that jurisdiction pay a fee for digital service tax, pay a withholding to the jurisdiction. I mean, some way, somehow, the UN faced the problem and find the easiest solution. But the problem is that the consumption of data create value, and it's not money that has got to be taxed. It's the value that has got to be taxed. So the value, the point is you don't pay, let's consider Facebook, the business model of Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Facebook doesn't pay for the data consumption. So this does not mean that data are useful and that's got a value. So this may be interesting. The amount of money is not able to evaluate the value of data. The only possibility to evaluate the value is the amount of revenue of the company that is using the data. That's why to pay digital tax on all the payment at the, for the consumption, or to pay digital tax on the revenues. But the point is, when countries agree and face the same scenario, then they can start a negotiation. If we say data has got a value and the United States say no, the value are the intangible, data are not useful. If we speak two different languages, we'll never find an agreement.
Mm-hmm.
So the point is, let's go back. Pillar 2, I think that some ways, let me say, at the OECD level, we have got already a solution. The point is, will the US administration will accept to go back to the OECD to sign a new agreement? At the present moment, the US is still at the OECD. They didn't withdraw. They didn't go away. So maybe that could be a solution. But I think we need to we need for the next steps of the US administration. Let's go back. What is discriminatory taxation? What is extraterritorial? Because this could be useful to define the new tax environment, the new tax framework for the future. Once you have got clear, which is the US opinion of the framework, then the new negotiation may start. And so from this perspective, maybe Pillar 1 could change considerably. The only thing I could say about Pillar 1 was the amount B. That is the easiest thing, because at the present moment could be very useful for the company, for the business in general, to calculate a fixed amount of marketing fees. In terms also of tax risk, I think the company would agree to have tax certainty, so not to be subjected to a tax assessment on this kind of cross-border payment. Because now the things are so much complicated that maybe a kind of cadastral quantification of international cross-border could be useful.
Mm-hmm.
Because every country at the present moment can say the benchmark, I mean, there are many benchmarks, but when you say that you pay 5%, 7%, is like a withholding at the end of the day, which is the amount, and you are not subject to tax assessment and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to what I call Pillar 3, Pillar 3 for me is the individual global minimum tax.
Mm-hmm.
Let me say, during the G20 in Brazil, they talk about the individual global minimum tax, the wealth, the high net worth individuals. And the point is, let's go back to the problem, then let's see how to find the solution. There is a problem of equity in taxation. So the point is, we need to tax the value more in terms of business, in terms of corporate taxation. The point is, there is a problem of equity. Yes or no? I think there may be. Also today on Le Figaro, there was an article where the journalist was asking if France was becoming a kind of a country au rentier. So people that receive the wealth from the parents and they don't need to work and so on. And this, in my personal opinion, may be a risk, because if you receive a huge amount of money and you don't want to risk those money and invest those money on businesses, on new enterprise, but you just want to buy US T-bond, for instance. Let me say, all the environment system become poor. So if we agree that there is a problem of equity, the second step is to understand which could be the right amount of taxation. Personally, I think that the rate of 2% yearly is too high, because 2% yearly, first of all, we need to understand which is the tax base, because people with a huge wealth, they have got wealth internationally. So the first problem is to understand which is the amount of the wealth. The second is to avoid double taxation. But the point is, from my perspective, 2% could become a kind of long-term confiscation. And this is to avoid. I would rather prefer to introduce a taxation on, let's say, 15% that I consider the fair amount of taxation. Is not a case that is the amount of the effective tax rate of the globe. Maybe tax not on the wealth yearly, but taxed on the amount of the increase of the wealth, on the performance you had during the year. And that could make sense, but this is my opinion. I'm not. So the point is, to go back to your question, we have a problem of equity. Yes. Could be the wealth taxation an answer? Yes, but let's be careful.
So we've gone over a bit, but just to summarize, it sounds like what you're saying is you think that we've made progress with the BEPS project. BEPS 1.0 wasn't a failure. We moved the ball forward. You think that BEPS 2.0 may not be perfect, but we've moved the ball forward again. And it sounds like you think that we probably will proceed to, if not a BEPS 3.0, then maybe a Pillar 3, and that an individual wealth tax might be part of that. From a U.S. perspective, it's almost
not from the US.
Yeah, from a U.S. perspective, that's very problematic, because I think it's probably unconstitutional. The Supreme Court hasn't said this officially, but they've said in dicta, which is not like an official opinion, but just the general view of the justices, that a wealth tax is almost certainly not something that they would consider to be constitutional. So if that's the case, do you think that the rest of the world is moving in that direction? Because you said that's your personal view. Do you think that's the next goal of the world? Because if that's the case, the U.S. would probably be unable to agree to that.
I think that the rest of the world will never adopt, at the present moment, will never adopt a kind of a wealth tax as the one suggested from the G20 in Brazil. Let me say, from the Italian perspective, we have taxes on, we have got heritage tax, for instance, and maybe we can fine tune in Italy the heritage tax that is we are a kind of tax haven in these terms. Consider that we pay, the lower tax rate is 2% for transfer between the father and the son, and we paid 8% if there is no liaison within the people. And in France, you pay 40%. That is a huge amount. Is quite. So the point is, I can understand to tax the wealth when the wealth is transferred from a person to another one. And we have got already the instrument. instead of taxing the wealth, I would rather, how can I say, push to invest this wealth and produce new wealth, new work, so to create a kind of incentive allowing wealthy people to invest money in new new businesses. This could be more useful for the system at the present moment.
Do you think?
I don't think that I think that the wealth tax is a kind of political flag. You know, we have got politicians from the right that maybe they could be against some civil right and so on, and we have got the same another flag from the left in terms of wealth tax. But in terms of efficiency, I think that equity is important, but the wealth tax may be not the right instrument.
Right.
Because
gotcha.
as you said, the US court already said, the Italian court and the EU Court of Justice never spoke about this argument because we don't have. But the point is, how can you create a wealth tax that is not discriminatory, confiscatory? Because if you put 2% in 15 years, at the end of the day, you consumed, you absorbed, let me say you consume the wealth that a businessman create in a life, and this is not equity is a right, is a problem, but it's not right. Then you produce income, you pay taxes, and then you have also to pay the wealth tax. Makes no sense. But this is just my opinion. I don't want to.
Right.
But the point is, you cannot tax many times. I used to say we are going to tax. For instance, you know, in Italy, in Europe, we had voluntary disclosure. So if, you know, during the 70s, many people bring money in Switzerland, you know, let's say what we in Italy we call black money. So wealth you have abroad and on which you haven't paid the tax. The point is, so we pay the voluntary disclosure. Now we pay income on this, on the revenues and so on, and then we will pay the heritage taxation. But I suppose that is necessary to concentrate to produce more income instead of taxing the old wealth. Mostly in Europe, because we need to invest more money in research, as I said before.
Gotcha.
In research, in defense, and so on. There are so many things to do.
Well, Daniele, I'm gonna leave it there. That was fascinating. Especially that last answer was perfect. So really appreciate it again, and I hope everybody listening enjoyed it, and hope to speak with you again soon on another topic. But thanks again, Daniele. All right.
At your
thanks,
disposal.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.